The world is getting smaller and smaller for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the ICC issued arrest warrants for him and his former Secretary of Defense, Yoav Gallant, as well as for a Hamas commander who may or may not be dead. For Palestinians, it may be their first whiff of justice since the start of the genocide in Gaza more than 13 months ago. And yet the crimes against them continue, while US officials continue to insist that Israel is improving the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Footage from the ground shows something quite different. The head of UNRWA's legal office tweeted this video from there last week, showing the utter scale of destruction caused by the Israeli war machine. Meanwhile, this apocalyptic video shows Palestinians carrying a white flag, if only that made a difference to Israeli warplanes, as they flee with whatever is left of their lives on their backs. That clip was taken by the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council and former UN humanitarian chief, Jan Egeland, who visited Gaza earlier this month. He describes the situation on the ground there as, quote, destruction beyond belief. And he joins me now from Norway. Jan Egeland, thanks so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered. When you saw, before we get into the humanitarian side of things, I do want to get your reaction, especially as I believe you're also the former Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch, to what was a huge decision by the ICC to issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant. What was your reaction when you heard that news?
Well, I wasn't that surprised, really, after having visited Gaza twice this last year, seen the destruction, heard everything that has happened through the ears and eyes and mouth of colleagues on the ground. The ICC was not a court created to take African war criminals. It was created to take international potential war criminals. And I'm glad they have now indicted people on both sides, because there have been war crimes on both sides in this horrific war.
Yeah, and after the ICC issued those warrants, at least 88 Palestinians were killed by Israel in occupied Gaza. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Israel stepped up its attacks, killing at least 47 people there. Commenting on those attacks, the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, said it is noticeable that as of January, at every move at the international justice level, there's been an immediate intensification of lethal violence against Palestinians in Gaza. I just wonder, is that a pattern that you or your team on the ground in Gaza has noticed, that there are these intensifications of Israeli attacks at certain times when things are going on in the world?
Well, that could be, but as I see it, it's been horrific ever since the onslaught on Israel on the 7th of October, where all of these horrific things happen in Israel. The response has been disproportional. It has not followed international law on there being distinction between military and civilian targets, that there should be precaution, and that it should be proportional. So basically, it's an indiscriminate warfare on Gaza after an indiscriminate attack on Israel. But I feel, Israel, as a member of the United Nations, created by the United Nations, should really be better than Hamas, better than Hezbollah, better than militia groups.
Jan, describe your latest visit to the Gaza Strip. Is Gaza livable anymore? Can the Palestinians still survive there, do you think?
Yeah, well, it depends on whether we will have access for the organizations who are there. So I have 60 plus humanitarian workers, colleagues on the ground in Gaza. We have hundreds of trucks in the pipeline. We could do a lot more. So does UNRWA, so does the World Food Programme, so does the Red Crescent, etc., etc. But the problem is that it's not only an indiscriminate warfare that is killing thousands of women and children that are completely innocent. No one doubts that, of what happened on the 7th of October. It's also a starvation policy against the entire population of Gaza. So to me, Mehdi, this is the besieged areas of Syria all over again. This is eastern Ghouta outside of Damascus. This is eastern Aleppo. This is Yarmouk camp
Yes.
for Palestinians in Syria, all over it.
Of course, the difference being, Jan, the world ostracized Bashar al-Assad, sanctioned Bashar al-Assad. That's not the case with Benjamin Netanyahu. How are the people in Gaza coping? Jan, you met a lot of ordinary people, ordinary men, women and children, nothing to do with Hamas, people, civilian suffering.
Yeah.
We are more than 13 months into this. How are they coping? How resilient are they? What did they say to you?
Yeah, I mean, they are exhausted beyond belief. They haven't fled once or twice. The average colleague of mine, Palestinian women and men, they've fled 8, 9, 10, up to 15 times. So basically every 3, 4 weeks, they have to flee from where they are. I mean, from their home to their uncle, again destroyed, to a distant aunt, again destroyed, to some tent somewhere, again have to leave, then to perhaps a collective center, a school, then another drone coming with a loudspeaker in the middle of the night saying, if you love your children, leave within 2 hours with whatever you can carry. They flee again and again. It's people cannot continue to live like this, but of course they have to, because they have no alternative. There is no escape from Gaza.
Yeah, and you've worked in the humanitarian field at the highest levels all across the world for over 2 decades now. How does Gaza compare to anything else you've seen in your career, in your life?
Well, it is unique in this one way. I cannot recall so many people being confined to such a small area with no escape and under such a bombardment for so long. But that's why I bring up the besieged areas of Syria, where, yes, I mean, of course, Assad was ostracized, as you say, by the West. He had a lot of support from Russia and from Iran and so on. This time it is happening with Western arms, which make it also more complicated for us, really, because it is the donors, the most generous countries to international solidarity. I mean, it's not the Asian growing economies that are feeding children across Africa and so on. It's North America, it's Europe, the European Union, etc. They provide relief through us, and the bombs that is pummeling Gaza. So it is unique in this way. Of course, I'm just back from Sudan. There are so many horror scenes on our watch, but Gaza is in a way injustice, indiscriminate warfare on quite a different level.
And I'll come back to Sudan in a moment. Just sticking with Gaza, last week the State Department spokesperson Matt Miller commented on the humanitarian situation in Gaza, saying, "We have seen the situation improve, though to see the actual realization of all those improvements, we do think will take some time." I mean, you were in Gaza, you have colleagues still in Gaza. Has the situation improved? What is Matt Miller seeing that the rest of us are not?
No, well, that's beyond the belief what they're saying there, because all of us, the aid organization on the ground, have seen that it has not improved. In fact, after the US ultimatum, improve the situation for the civilian population, Israel, or we will cut military aid, because the deadline was just after the election, the number of trucks went down. It's been 37 trucks of aid on average per day since that time. We needed more than 500 trucks. Many of the trucks that, or rather, of the few trucks that make it into Gaza, which is besieged, majority is being looted, plundered, because there is no police there. The police was bombed to pieces by Israel, and Israel are giving us aid routes that are unsafe. And these gangs, mafias, certain families seem to be able to do whatever they want in Gaza now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the UN memo that the Washington Post obtained just recently, saying that the looting activities are taking place, but the gangs there, quote, may be benefiting from a passive, if not active, benevolence or protection from the Israeli military. One gang leader, the memo said, established a military-like compound in an area restricted, controlled, and patrolled by the IDF. Is that what your people are telling you as well is the case?
Yeah, well, what I saw with my own eyes coming over Kerem Shalom, there is a special route now which is working. We enter buses in Amman, Jordan, and you get off when you reach Gaza, Kerem Shalom border crossing. You go into armored UN vehicles, and we go on. They were loading some trucks behind us at that point. We went 4 minutes from Kerem Shalom, and I saw maybe 100 young men with sticks and with clubs and so on, preparing themselves to take the 5 poor trucks following on with total impunity. There were Israeli snipers nearby. You cannot walk. If there had been a civilian policeman, he would have been killed immediately. So how come these gangs can roam freely, loot everything, and be part of a war economy that is enriching some in Gaza, but really meaning that the vast majority are at starvation level?
Do you think, and you're not just a former humanitarian chief, you're also a former foreign minister for the Norwegians, what do you make of what's coming our way geopolitically? Donald Trump is going to be president on January 20th. Mike Huckabee is going to be the US ambassador to Israel, who says there's no such thing as an occupation, no such thing as the West Bank, no such thing as Palestinians. What is coming down the line for Gaza and the West Bank in 2025, in your view?
Well, nobody knows really. But I've reflected on this of late. If Donald Trump wants to put America first, he may end the policy where the Biden administration has put Netanyahu first, America second, and humanity third. I think it could be that they would wake up by a Trump administration seeing that this is costing really Israel and the US a lot in the rest of the world. Because really it's the US, Germany, to some extent Britain, that is really supporting Israel now. The rest of the world, including my own country, Norway, which was instrumental in creating the State of Israel. Norway had the first Secretary General of the United Nations system. He was key in this. We were pro-Israel long before the US and UK. And now Norway is basically saying, this is not the Israel we grew to know. This is not the IDF as a professional army we knew. This has been extremism taking over Israel.
You have seen your fair share of suffering this month as you went from a genocide in Gaza to the worst displacement crisis in the world, another genocide, many would argue, in Sudan, where you wrote 14 million people have been driven from their homes by armed groups acting with impunity. What is the humanitarian situation that we don't talk enough about, like in Sudan right now?
Well, it's horrendous. And of course, the difference between Gaza and Sudan is that Sudan is a very big place. Gaza is a small place where 2 million people are confined to besiegement and the bombing, indiscriminate bombing and starvation. Well, in Sudan, it's 24 million people, and they were poorer to start with than even in Gaza. And now 14 million people have fled. More than 20 million need food aid, which they are not getting in many parts of the country. So I really felt it was an underfunded operation. It's an there is no attention to it, underreported emergency, and it is complete impunity from all of these armed men who are willing to fight each other to the last woman and child. I'm shocked over the size of the problem and that it is as neglected in the world as it is. Gaza and Ukraine gets attention. This gets no attention.
Why do you think that is, Jan?
I think it's a combination of things. One is the world has become a colder and more nationalistic, egocentric place than it was 20 years ago when I was the UN humanitarian coordinator, and we got not just George Clooney came with celebrities and the world press, as you may recall, but President Bush and Prime Minister Blair and the French president and the EU Commission felt that Darfur was really an outrage, and they gave us all the money, and they were collective pressure on Bashir, on President Bashir, etc. in Sudan. Now I feel that it's nationalism, and then there is a very polarized mood around Gaza, and then there is Europe and the West seeing that Ukraine is a war in Europe that's very dangerous, and that there ends international attention, really. So what I'm arguing is that if really our ideals is so worthless anymore, look at our interests. If we're not providing relief and hope to the people of Sudan, of Gaza, and of Lebanon, Europe will wake up to 1 million people crossing the Mediterranean again. Donald Trump will see that people will be flocking in greater numbers from Central America and elsewhere because there's no hope there. So it is in conformity with our ideals and our interests to help in these situations.
Well said. We will have to leave it there. Jan Egeland, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.